Great. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and Happy New Year to everybody. Have the clerk please call the roll.
Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
Treasurer Horning?
Here.
Clerk Chopu? Here. Trustee Collier?
Here.
Trustee Germain?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Petrucci?
Here. Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Number 5 is call to the public. Anybody at call to the public this evening? Nobody at call to the public. We'll move on to item number 6, which is approval of our consent agenda.
Move. Support.
Motion by Trustee Petrucci, second by Trustee Germain. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have no pending or new business this evening, and we'll move on to board and managers' reports. Our first meeting in January. We start with Clerk Shofu.
No report.
Treasurer Horning.
I'd just like to congratulate Mickey and Eileen Sackow. Today is their 70th wedding anniversary. That's why he's not here.
Good for him.
Good for him.
Thank you. Trustee Kalani.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Trustee Germain.
I have nothing tonight.
Trustee Harper.
No report.
Trustee Petrucci.
I have no report tonight.
My only report is I got through an email that there was a bald eagle pictured on Round Lake, and I didn't know they were this far south. So
They're in Kensington, a pair.
Are they?
There's a pair nesting out
All
there.
right. So I thought that was kind of neat. Manager Wickman.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just maybe a couple highlights or updates from the operational report. We do have a finalist for the planning director position. We'll be doing one last round of interviews with him, with supervisor as well as the planning commission chair on Thursday, and hope to offer a conditional offer at that point, and would be on the next agenda. So hopefully by the 1st of the February we'll have somebody in place. We're working on that. And then just a reminder, of course, of our special meeting next Tuesday at 6:30. Give me back your orders as well for that. And we have a full agenda there on some capital project updates and some discussions and decision making. So looking forward to making some more progress on those things. Otherwise, happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Doesn't look like it. If there are no questions, we'll take a brief recess, and then we'll go into our work session this evening. We are in a brief recess.
Do we need to take a brief recess? We just started 4 minutes ago.
It was a lot of work, man.
See, Matt's still recessing. Oh. Yeah. He's not leaving this year. Sure. Matt, do you have something in your car you got to get?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
AR-15.
I was hoping you didn't have enough already.
So anyway, so you went into for Christmas. Or you just get out?
Does this thing start tomorrow? 8:45.
Where are we at on the Mayberry Homes guys?
Fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 18 revenue projections.
It's really nothing new, nothing too exciting, so I won't, I guess, just talk for the sake of talking. A lot of this, I think we've spent a lot of time on these over the years, taking a deeper dive into certain line items, and I think by now you understand the methodology that we take a look at. Of course, it's a conservatively underestimated of the revenue, and then we generally exceed those projections. Probably a couple things that are worth noting as it relates to the general fund is that not a very large increase in tax base going up because the inflation factor was considered quite low. We've not really made hefty assumptions in regard to new construction for that second year out. So if we do see a significant portion of what we anticipate, that will have a positive impact on property tax revenue. Maybe the biggest, couple of the biggest jumps that you might know is, shared revenue is still clipping along at a healthy pace as far as the overall economy of Michigan increasing, above inflation. So that has a positive impact. You will note then that zoning fees, we've, netted, we're on pace to net another $20,000 this year in application fees over past years. And so that one's, we try not to crystal ball it too much, so we conservatively estimate that, maybe a little bit less than what we did this year is what the next 2 years hold. Of course, we know that there are pending ideas and concepts that could come forward and ramp that up much higher, but we're happy with taking the conservative route. But I think general fund is a pretty straightforward science. And the notes are, I think, hopefully are self-explanatory. Any questions or comments on any of the revenue general fund related? And then as it relates to the other funds, you see the BS&A reports on each fund. We do that exercise for you on every fund, even some of the things that are pretty more mundane. I don't necessarily have a lot to add to that discussion. The road millage revenue is anticipated to crest that $900,000 mark next year and in future years. And the rest of the funds are pretty straightforward. We've just plugged in the assumptions for the water and sewer rates. We do, of course, have a sewer rate study pending, and that will align with the budget process, so that will probably be updated during that discussion. But I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the other fund revenues.
Are we projecting another increase in the sewer rates?
The sewer rates, I'm sure there will be some, because we, even though we're preliminarily jumping into the sewer rates, even though there's another year left on the rate study, but we already know that the county rate increases exceeded what we had projected. So I know we're going to have to count to that. We're not going to catch up to solvency as quick as we had hoped, but we're still working on that model. We got a couple months behind with a finance director out.
What is Genesee County's wastewater treatment? Is that going up?
No, they just went up that there a year or two ago. They generally only do about every 5, I think it was 6 years since the last one, and it actually only went up. It went up smaller than we had projected, so that hasn't been too bad. It's the county's rate study, you'll recall, where they're trying to build in a lot of contingencies to infrastructure replacement in the future and how much capital they have on hand. It was a little bit aggressive in the rates that they were doing, but we got them to agree to do it over 7-year implementation, and we'll keep an eye on that.
So what is that? You don't know what that percentage is at this time?
As a percentage, it's not an easy number to track, because you've got the flow rate is actually going down, and then the ready to serve charges are going up, which is what it should be, because the fixed costs are the fixed costs. I can't remember the percentages. It was aggressive. I just know that.
How are there? What you're saying is the county is building up a reserve.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they're doing?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. For replacement. And my concern is that reserve is there's no set amount for what that reserve should look like. So it's sort of an arbitrary decision on the part of the county. And I think at the end of the day, we should hold the county to a rationale. They need to set up a basis or provide a rationale as to what they think is a reasonable reserve.
These are the very conversations I've had with the county since the day I got here, don't throw a dart at a dartboard. Where are you headed and why? And don't duplicate what our sewer fund is relatively healthy at this point with a couple $1 million. And so if something were to hit the fan, we could actually fund that through that means rather than artificially inflating the sewer rates faster than you need to in order to build up some sort of fund balance right now. You can take your time with that. This rate study did make an assumption that in the 5 years that they would get to the $1 million point. That's agreeable enough. They've already made overtures about that their goal is something beyond that once they get through this 5 years, and we've already planted our feet on there needs to be a methodology for what your goal is in that regard, but we can all agree $1 million is the minimum. So this will, in the 5-year rate study, they'll get to $1 million in reserves, and then there'll be another rate study at that point.
Our reserves, what's our rationale?
Well, it's not necessarily a rationale. It's just we still had that money's cash flowed left from, when all the RUs were bought way early on. We, of course, have been spending that money down in controlling the rates and in dealing with the sewer properties. So it's gone down over time. We're still at a deficit operationally.
James, I do have on number 668 on revenue for septage receiving station. It went from projected 15-16 to 240 to down to 192.5.
What page is that?
Page 16. Page 16, 16.
16?
Right at the bottom, it's number 668, septage station revenue.
Of the packet, page 16, or of?
Under.
Everybody's got a cold.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Just got something sneezing at me.
Oh, maybe I'm on a different.
What's the header? Which
says budget report 590 sewer operations.
590. Okay.
Preliminary revenue projection, January 2016. And on the top right, it says page 16 of 21.
In the packet, that's overshown, but that's fine. Septic receiving revenue, you're looking at the note then?
Yeah, it just, it says projection for this year, 240, or actually, 240, and then next year it's going down to 192.5.
So we've, I'm sorry. So we haven't done anything major to this revenue projection because we're working on the rate study at this time. That's a conservative number. We're on pace to hit that 240 for this year, and that the 192.5 we just carried through what we had in years past.
Plug new numbers there.
We're well ahead of that pace.
Okay,
yes.
Okay.
This needs the sewer rate. The projection is just a simple baseline of carrying forward what was in there before.
Okay.
It will change.
All right.
If you do have any further questions that come up as you look at the revenue, please do feel free to reach out. Like I say, it's pretty straightforward methodology.
Any other questions from any board members at this point? Being none, let's move on to item number B, was reorganization plan.
So I had forwarded to you under separate cover last week a white paper on a couple of structure changes that I'm recommending and I'm looking for board discussion and feedback on. First is in the area of assessing This is a follow-up to the benchmarking study that was done last year. It had raised some questions in regard to our assessing costs per capita and per parcel. I think after studying it over this last year, I was able to confirm a couple of suspicions on why there was some divergence in those benchmarks. And it's a matter of not necessarily comparing apples to apples, in that other municipalities are not tracking the true costs of assessing as well as we are when it comes to their legal costs or their benefit costs or things like that. And so we weren't able to get a true comparison of costs. And certainly it is worth noting, and we were really waiting to see how the audit would go. Of course, we ended up with a perfect score on the audit, whereas our neighbors and other communities in Southeast Michigan did not. And so, that certainly is to some extent an affirmation of the investment that we're making there, that we're keeping good records and producing good assessment rolls. That does not mean that we don't scrutinize, what is the cost of that perfect score versus what something less than that would cost. And we certainly looked at. We knew that many other communities, particularly in Oakland County, or those that are contracting out, whether it be to a county equalization or to a private contractor, that there was a big sacrifice in customer service and responsiveness to property owners or developers or residents. At the end of the day, my recommendation is not to make those same sacrifices that others have done in the quality of service when it comes to keeping good records and having putting yourself in the best position to have a defensible assessment role. And to be ready to be responsive, particularly because activity is only increasing. Obviously, this last year and a little bit the year before and the next couple of years are anticipated to be an increase in activity, and so at least somewhat sustaining our assessing manpower there will be important to keep up with that. We already know that we're not hitting that 20% review a year. I think we've got the skeleton that we can. That's okay, because we're still doing well with less than that 20% a year. But my recommendations on assessing are basically a variation of status quo. That is, one, I think we need to get our appraiser up to an assistant assessor. I think we need to have a little more foresight on potential succession planning for that assistant assessor and in the future, and keep them a part of our organization, and to take the part-time position and make that the appraiser position, and in the end really downgrade that a pay grade and then the responsibilities needed from that position, and also take about 100 part-time hours a year off of that. In doing so, the existing part-time assistant assessor going to the part-time appraiser, there's no need to adjust their rate of pay. They're within the pay grade of what I'm proposing to be that new part-time appraiser position. At the time that we elevate the appraiser up to the assistant assessor full-time position, I would be recommending raise commensurate with the factors that we normally look at in such a case. Sometime in the near future, I would look to bring forth that recommendation before the end of the fiscal year. I think it's important to do. The net result of that, I show you there in the allocation, is still an overall savings by reducing the number of hours overall dedicated to assessing. Pretty straightforward in my mind. I'm happy to hear the board's thoughts or questions or feedback on that approach as regards to assessing.
James, you might have mentioned it, but you were going to FOIA the study
yes.
that was done recently by the state. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's so important, and we were hoping to have that before we sort of wrapped up this analysis. With the audit that was done, anybody who did not receive a perfect score on the audit, they had to come up with an action plan in response to the state's findings. And submit that to the state, and actually the time has come and gone that the state replied back to all those municipalities to say, yes, we accept your action plan for mitigation. We have actually filed a FOIA with the state to get a copy of all those action plans and the state's correspondence and responses to those for all of all the Livingston County and our neighboring and even those benchmarked comparable communities throughout the state, just to see and better understand that, again, that question of, okay, we attained perfection in the audit, at what cost, and what would it have cost us if we got dinged on a couple things? I mean, that's something we should know, and I want to get a better handle on that. And so these are some recommendations for the next step, and we will always be in a mode of constant improvement. So we're still taking a look at things, and we'll continue to monitor going forward any other tweaks that I would bring back to you as recommendations for improvement. So that data, when we get it and we have a chance to look at it, we'll certainly report back to you on what we find out.
Well, in addition, there's always, to some degree, perhaps a cost of maintaining that level. And so it sounds like with the reorganization, that's the goal would be to, with the new reorg, because we attained that goal with the staff we have.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a subject to that if we didn't reorganize, we would fall short?
Yeah, there's a number of, I think to some extent, once we've put in place a lot of processes and improvements in the years that I've been here, so that the bones are there for just good foundation of good assessing records. So in some respects, it's arguably easier to maintain that going forward. But in other respects, if you have an uptick in activity where you got a lot of new sales, a lot of transfers, a lot of development, a lot of land splits, a lot more activity, it becomes harder to do that. And then you have the other phenomena that we've talked about, is that the assessing labor market is a fickle thing right now. I mean, it's not easy to find qualified folks, and so the need to retain is really all that more important there until the state deals with the gap that's there in the talent, as far as and the requirements they have for licensing are a little bit out of line, and I think they're doing some things to correct that, but that's going to take a few years. So certainly in the short term, we ought to do some things to try to make sure we keep the talent that we have as well.
James, it was either last meeting maybe that we approved the new GIS flyover.
Mm-hmm.
In the assessing department, that layer is really important. Will all the information that we have be able to, hopefully just with a click of a switch, have that new information as the overlay? We're not going to have to re-enter stuff into the new software that are compatible, I'm hoping, or...
No, that continues. The flyover is beneficial to us because it means less field work. It allows assessing to, with high resolution photography, they're able to identify improvements to the property more easily and take measurements off those photographs without having to do a field visit.
But I guess my hope is that all the foundation work that we've done doesn't have to be duplicated to get it onto the new format.
Yeah, it's all in the software, and basically it's just another map, because every historical map is still in there. In fact, assessing uses that. They look at the last map and the map before that to see if there were improvements to the property made, and that's how they identify things.
Okay. Any board questions or comments on the recommendation for assessing?
So there's a lot more moving parts to the planning piece of it. This one was definitely a tougher nut to crack. I've had the opportunity, and before Dave left, he and I had a lot of good conversations that really led to this round of recommendations on some of the things that are needed. The bottom line, or the end goal of what's proposed here, is there needs to be a full-time planner to assist the planning director in order to achieve what's on their plate. And in order to provide that and to make the trade-offs necessary, we have to do some things on the clerical end where we're taking some of those duties, giving them to the full-time planner from what is now a part-time planner, and then consolidating some duties there. But really it all sort of rotates around having that full-time planner there to be more available to help with the issues that come up on a day-to-day basis, whether it be the more nuanced questions that come up at a counter or on the phone that were, getting referred to the planning director too quickly and taking up a lot of their time, or some of the enforcement issues that, became, kept ticking up and elevating and ended up in the planning director's desk and taking up more of their time than we can really afford to give as an organization. That full-time planner becomes that buffer. They oversee zoning inspector and the ordinance enforcement aspects. They are a resource to the counter traffic and the goofy questions that come in on what people want to do, and can provide an informed and educated interpretation to the ordinance that people need on issues. So that's really the central part of this restructuring. In the end, the duties that are left for the needs of a clerical really are a combination of what's done there now by the two folks, and with a stress on the office management piece, the file office organization, file management, the database management, bookkeeping with the escrow accounts and everything. And the thing is that the two folks that are there now have not demonstrated the skills necessary to do that, all of those combined tasks, and so we would have to go and find a new full-time planning assistant, and we would have to part ways with our existing planning assistants.
So the question
Yes.
becomes, is it going to cost us more?
Yes. I put I did some math on that on the 5th page of that reorganization plan. And what costs us more is because there's now a third full-time person. It's the benefit costs. I think my estimate of $19,000 and change would be an overall resource increase, comparing apples to apples on the pay grades. I think is nominal in light of, we talked about earlier, we have planning and zoning fees are going up, the activity is going up. I think the productivity increases would be more than demonstrated, and the quality of the service and responsiveness that we would provide, certainly I feel justify that. I would continue to monitor that. I think there'll be opportunities to capture those costs better as we reevaluate our application fees or whatever. But like say, we're on track to collect another $20,000 this year in application fees than previous years. You can't assume the level of activity would sustain, and we would always be monitoring that. But there would be an increase in cost.
Are you looking for a vote tonight on that to move forward?
No, we don't need a vote on that tonight. Certainly would covet your feedback on it, or thoughts or questions or more information that you need to make an informed decision on that down the road.
When were you thinking about the implementation of your recommendation?
So certainly, first things first, got to hire a planning director. Now, as soon as I get a planning director on board, I would look to make these moves sooner than later, particularly because we're in a little bit of a down season before things start picking up again. I'd prefer to do that then than be making a lot of wholesale changes in the middle of our busy season. That may be inevitable. But I certainly would like to move quickly on this. The recommendation on this is intentional somewhat on moving forward now rather than waiting any longer as it relates to another planning director coming in, waiting for them to get oriented, to get the lay of the land and be in a position to say, well, I need to do this, this, and this. I've got enough observation on my own and conversations with the past planning directors to know this much needs to be improved, and there may be other incremental improvements down the road. But for now, I can't afford to have another planning director getting pulled too many directions. If we were looking to try to retain somebody, and these were definitely factors in our retention ability of spending too much negative energy in often ordinance enforcement things, or not getting the productivity they need in delegated tasks to their staff. These are things to help our retention of a planning director as well, and that I should have said as much up front. That is definitely a essential piece of this, of why we need. By having a full-time planner on board, we're in a much, much better position when it comes to succession planning. You have that person in the wings being groomed and ready should the time come where the planning director does move on. Now you have a more logical person that you've had time to prepare them to transition up into that position potentially. And that would be our eye towards. We don't have many places in the township where we can do that kind of succession planning. This is one of them. And of course, we've seen turnover in that position, and whatever we can do to mitigate or prevent that is what I'm here for.
On the planning issue, I'm not necessarily opposed to having an assistant planner and all that, but my concern, where do we stand with townships of similar size that have a planning director? Do they typically have a assistant planning director as well, or what's the staff levels? I'm just curious. I mean, it's hard to figure that out, because every community is a little bit different in terms of where they are in their development and growth. But it seems like we're back where we were. We're getting close to back where we were maybe in 2004, 2005 in terms of folks coming into the township and developing.
I don't think we're at that level yet.
We're not at that level yet? So what are your thoughts, Joe, on that then? Because I'd be curious what your thoughts are. I mean, are we ready for having...
I can see what I could pull on as far as what neighboring communities or like size communities or nearby communities are doing. I can pull that information.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the existing staff, are they aware of this reorganization plan?
Yes, I have spoken with them to let them know that I was going to be proposing this, so they were aware. But I want them to find out some other way.
And is there something we can do if we move forward with this reorganization plan for those employees that may not qualify for the positions that we are going to advertise for?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I did want to touch on that tonight as well. I would be recommending at the time that we do it we have not done this in the past, but just to come up with a simple severance agreement, and one that is economically is just equal to what their unemployment benefit would be, but just kind of handles the matter with a little more dignity than having to go through the rigmarole of the unemployment process. I've talked with Mike O'Meara about that, and we'll just come up with a simple agreement. That's what I would propose, is a simple severance that is equal to what that employment benefit is due, and we obviously would be happy to provide that and just do it outside of a bunch of paperwork.
I'd like to think about this a little bit more.
If there's no reason to act tonight, James, I believe you mentioned that you would be running this past whoever you bring on as a planner, and there might be some flexibility to this.
Yeah, there's more than one path to get to where I've recommended, so how we get there, I'm open to, I would defer to the new planning director on. I still would be probably coming back with actionable recommendations in the near future. So if you have other thoughts or questions, and I'll pursue answers on what was asked tonight. But if you have other ones, please let me know now or later, because I will be asking for action at future meetings.
Anything else on the reorganization plan?
Well, the other thing I'd like to say is I have to hear a lot more about this, and I have to think about it a lot more, because my off-the-cuff thought is I don't want to add more people to the township right now, and I don't want to increase costs on salaries in that department right now. That's my off-the-cuff thought.
Well, we're not increasing because we're eliminating 2 and hiring.
No, you're not. You're increasing it by $20,000, and you're adding another employee.
You're taking the position of,
And I would like to, I have to hear more about it before I can, I'm just telling you what my initial feeling is it seems to me that we always bring in employees with the anticipation of getting more work instead of doing it like other communities do, and they wait for the work to come and then they get the employees. I mean, we kind of do it up front, and I sometimes that's good, but I really have to think about adding more employees, because don't forget we're basically replacing 2 people that don't have the qualifications with 1 person who does. So it should be a wash. So why do we need the other person there then?
then the other person, right now we have a part-time planning person. They want to increase that to a
But
full-time.
when we first hired, I can't remember her name.
Kim,
No, our first director,
oh,
Marty, she was supposed to take place of the planner. And now we're hiring a planner on top of that. So I have to really think about it. I'm going to try to keep an open mind on it. Let me think about it, and I'll tell you what my feelings are. And this is my off-the-cuff remark, okay?
So yes, I appreciate that, and please do, if you have any other questions, let me know, and I'm happy to
But
talk.
I can remember when we hired Marty, she was to replace the McKenna, the planner.
Yes.
Okay, so then Marty leaves, we get Dave, and he was supposed to do that. Now we're going to get somebody to replace Dave, but now we need to get a planner. I mean, it's got to make a little bit more sense to me than that.
So, and I don't know that we'll fully resolve that tonight. So right now we have a full-time planning director, and that would sustain. We have about a half-time planner. And then in between the 2 planning assistants, we have about 1.7 full-time equivalents. So between the planner and the 2 planning assistants, that's about 2.2 full-time equivalents. What this proposes is to take that, to actually reduce the number of hours to 2 full-time equivalents. The reason the costs increase mostly because you add a benefit cost in there, because now you have another full-time, whereas you had a bunch of part-timers before, or 2 part-timers, you turn it into a full-timer. But you're taking it from 2.2 FTEs down to 2 FTEs. So it's a reduction in the number of hours. The cost increases because of the benefit costs. And so you do have a cost increase on labor. I appreciate that. As far as the number of hours dedicated, it's actually less. The key is that because you're trying to raise the number of hours available from the paraprofessional who's got a planning background and can do a better job of handling some of the more complex things that they do, it costs you more. So certainly if anybody has any questions, let me know. I'm happy to talk.
Any other comments? Being none. And our next item was to go into closed session for the personal evaluation of the manager. Joe Claney had called me yesterday, I believe, and suggested that we table to our next meeting. And you hadn't met yet. I know you met this morning, or this afternoon.
The subcommittee, manager subcommittee, was hoping to meet prior to the holidays. We had a date scheduled, but I think people were sick and not able to make it. It was the 21st we were supposed to meet, but in any case, we met tonight. There were 3 topics we talked about. One, we were asked to look at salary range on the manager's salary. There's the existing salary range that James provided, and then one based on his 2015 compensation study. And we were asked to take a look at that. And we have a proposal that we would like to maybe take up at the time of the review. The other issue was the job description, and Matt has agreed to take we've taken all the documents that we've been provided, basically the old job description, James's draft, and a side-by-side that James prepared. And so we've taken that, and Matt's going to take a look at and come up with some of the edits to that job description. And then as far as the review, I think it was a consensus that we had that a lot of us, that takes a long time. That review typically takes a little more time. And we thought having a special meeting just for the review would make more sense and get it done and over with.
Could we do all three elements in one meeting?
Yes, I think that's good.
And I had a couple of board committee members ask to maybe be, if excused is the correct word, to move on from that committee. I did ask our clerk, and our previous clerk was on that committee, and I think it worked out well because all the information could come into that individual and be dispersed to all the board members. And Larry has agreed to be on that committee. So I don't know if you want that to happen now or later after this go through.
Well, I think we all got an email from Larry today that he will collect all the reviews.
So this is what I would recommend.
So we were going to do that. I thought that was a good idea.
Is we have this on our agenda next week. James, you have a full agenda for us next week with the capital improvements. Unless you want to meet twice, if you think this is a full meeting in its own, or put this on after the capital improvement plan. However,
We're going to meet at 6:30, I think.
we'll put it on after. But everybody get all your information to Clerk Shofu. And if you could get your recommendation to the clerk and have it forwarded to the board so we can all review it prior to the meeting, then everybody will have all the information. Does that sound acceptable?
You already got mine, did you?
Got mine.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have to have you had it on the agenda, but that's our plan right now, is to move it to next week.
So I don't want to make any misrepresentation. I've got a full agenda next week. So, I mean, it's 7:45 now. Next week, by the time we're done with CIP stuff, even start at 6:30 is going to be well past that. We got a lot of ground to cover. So I don't want to give you any misrepresentation of how quickly we'll be done with the stuff we need to get done.
The purpose for the work session next week, that is for us to discuss internally things, right?
I'm sorry?
The purpose for the work
Discuss what?
session next week is for us to just discuss things internally?
Yes, work session.
So it's up
We'll
to
move that one
we
ahead?
can revise that agenda, even though you have said it, we can change it, correct?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So can we move the manager stuff up to next week and move that ahead, or is that something that really is urgent?
You'll recall my request for that work session was for next week at the latest. I kind of toyed with the idea of asking you to do it last week. I knew that wouldn't fly. And we've got some decisions to make as it relates to the TAP grant in the village, and then sidewalks, if we want to do some sidewalks this year. It's your prerogative. It's your privilege. We've already delayed a lot of these things. I'm getting concerned with the backlog.
Should we have a separate date for the managers meeting? Can we do it Wednesday next week or Thursday?
My opinion is that we should, I hate putting James off and having his review. I would say that's, in my mind, more important than other things he's talking about right now. We're not building sidewalks in January, so if we have to wait a couple of weeks to talk about that, I don't know why that's a big issue. The other thing we could do is amend our agenda and talk about some of them right now. It's, like he said, it's not even 8 o'clock yet.
The only thing, do we have those documents in front of us?
I don't.
This is what I would recommend, that we put the manager's review on first at our meeting, special meeting, and then we come out of that, and then we start working on the capital improvement.
That sounds fine to me.
Does anybody have a problem with that? And then if we have to spend another meeting on capital improvements, we will. We didn't have a second capital improvement meeting scheduled, or a special meeting scheduled this month, correct?
Right.
We only had the one.
No.
Right now, we only had the one.
Right.
Does anybody have a problem with that?
I'll just appeal to the board on, if you feel that you need to wait on the review, I'm at peace with that. Priority-wise, as those capital projects are more important to me than you can not have my review ever. I've been trying to keep things moving along on this. I'd be lying if I didn't say I was disappointed that if I had known this earlier, we could have tried to hurry up on some of the capital projects to have it ready for tonight. I hate leaving here after a 45-minute meeting.
Me too.
And missing an opportunity to get some things done that are of import.
Jeff, you want to do a review now?
Well, I don't. I mean, that's the privilege of the board. I mean, we put it out.
I got mine turned in.
I got mine turned.
Well, the problem is, though, that in the past, we had a pretty good process where everybody got the information, and then we would talk amongst ourselves, and then we could have, I think it's going to take us a half hour, 40 minutes just to go through everybody's review. So my personal opinion is we should wait. Should have Matt, how quickly can you have the information to us?
Whatever.
For your recommendation on
Probably
the
Thursday or Friday.
Thursday or Friday? So if we had all the information back to everybody by Friday, I mean, that's what I feel. I think we should wait till next week because nobody has any information in front of them right now for anything.
With regards to which one?
Either the review or capital improvements.
Is there a regional deal?
Why can't we,
Can I throw this out? Could we still go into closed session and talk tonight amongst ourselves about James?
that's his prerogative.
And then convey the information to him next week? That would perhaps save some time. Even though you don't know my thoughts, I can easily share them.
I don't have a problem with that.
I don't
Do you have a
have a
problem with that, James?
I'm sorry, Miss.
We went into closed session tonight and have the discussion amongst ourselves, and then next week bring you in as the review of tonight's.
How long do you anticipate, or your discussion versus my time?
Well, you know how it is.
An hour to 3
Well, I
hours.
guess I'm just wondering if you're going to get together. I don't.